misheard it now.
Yeah.
My dad.
Okay. Oh, nice. Really hard. Yeah. Like a different right? Right.
All right, everybody got pizza? Ready to get started?
Good. All right, y'all.
All right, listen, thanks for taking time out of your day to come to hear some inspirational speaking and some crazy ass shit. Chris Bruno is here to talk to you guys about his startup, Rally Road, which if you think about it, makes no sense at all, but he's making a really remarkable thing out of it. The idea around it, I'm going to let him talk about it. He can talk about funding and statistics, but it's a brilliant idea. And so when you guys are sitting in your venture rooms coming up with crazy stuff, and you think, oh, this will never work, remember that there are a lot of crazy ideas that actually have a lot of foundation to them. And they have models to follow across the industry that are based on other things that we do. So when you look up Rally Road, you see it's listed in LinkedIn under financial services. Doesn't initially make sense, but then when you read about it, yeah, it makes complete sense. So I think you're going to find a little bit around spirit and around intent and around what the struggle is to go and figure out how to make one of these startups come to reality. These guys are going to have a lot of questions about funding and how the acquisitions work and how you get started. Try to make it as interactive as possible. We say that every single time, and it's never interactive. Everybody sits there quietly and eats their pizza. But this is a guy you want to ask questions, right? You want to find out how he did what he did and how he's going to do what he's going to do next. And you guys are all working in that space, and so please definitely barrage him with questions and ask him about things that you guys want to know. And I think that's how everybody's going to get the most value out of the conversation. So, welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
This is the crazy DV crew, and I'm sure they're going to ask lots of questions.
Please do. I don't like sitting up here and talking to people unless I
Thanks,
feel
Joe.
like it's coming back.
And then also I wanted to just quickly ask Alex to do another more intimate intro.
Okay.
He and Chris actually go way back, and wanted to just have you share a little bit of that backstory
Thanks,
before we
Elijah.
get started.
Yeah, so Chris is one of my dearest friends. I don't think I'd be at DB without him. He taught me pretty much everything I know about business development and partner management. I don't know if you guys ever had that experience for some of you other people early on, like a mentor type taking you on your first big conference call, and you get verbal yes on the phone, and then after phone hangs up, you ask a stupid question. I think I asked, like, what's a rev share? At Health Guru, Chris built one of the largest video syndication networks of its time, and then from there went on after the acquisition to build an extremely large video network, YouTube MCN, with network of one. During the acquisition time at Health Guru, when things were in transition phase, we'd have these routine happy hours, and I asked Chris, so what's next for you? And he said, well, I got this idea. This is back in like 2013, 2014. He's like, I don't know, I want to start like a hedge fund for cars. And I'm like, that sounds really cool. And then, well, here we are 5 years later, and we're working with what we're calling Rally Road now. So let's
Thank
you guys
you,
take it
sir.
from here.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Alex. So again, thanks again for making your way out. Chris, fortunately, Upfront had their summit, so that
Yeah.
brought you into town.
Great week out here.
But hopefully you can get out to see us more often. We also have our office in Manhattan. In Manhattan, not Manhattan. Yeah, we'd love to hear in your words, like, what is Rally Road?
Sure. So Rally Road at its heart, we wanted to be as close to the stock market as possible. The cars, forget about them for a minute. They're irrelevant, right? They're just something that happens to be a good uncorrelated investment that a lot of people could understand and that a lot of people can relate to. And so for me, this is a financial platform. The cars just happen to be where we start. And really what we've created out of it is a place where you can take absolutely anything public. You can do it super efficiently. And we created a liquid secondary market behind that. And that's the key, right? Before we started this, we said to ourselves, if this is ever going to work, the two things that we have to accomplish is retail investors are out there, they want to be involved in new types of investments, but they don't have access. They have information, they have passion, especially in asset classes where they're super comprehensible, like cars, but they don't have the lane to get involved in those things. And the second thing is a lot of these asset classes have really high spreads and very little liquidity. So if we were going to make this work, we said it has to feel as much like the stock market as possible. It has to be open to everybody. There has to be no barriers to entry, and there has to be a way to get out. Right? That liquidity was a big piece of it. And so that was sort of the mission we set out to create: is how can we create a stock market for any asset class that isn't traditional in nature, any alternative asset class. And we just decided to start with cars because, one, I happen to have a huge passion for, and I happen to have lost a lot of money not making investments in the past because of those structural inefficiencies that existed.
Gotcha. And are you pretty agnostic to what assets you go after subsequent to cars?
Yes and no. So I like to think about asset classes across a few different spectrums. For me, information and flat information curve is the most important, right? So in collectible cars, I'll show you a 12-year-old who knows more than the guy or girl with 100 cars in the garage, right? It's an information spectrum where rarity, where the things that drive value are not impossible to find out. So what that means is okay, that's a flat information spectrum and a flat passion spectrum for the asset class. What's missing is the asymmetry and ability to get into the asset class, right? If you look at something like venture, for example, which is where I started my career, it's very different, right? There's a reason a venture capitalist exists, right? A lot of the equity crowdfunding stuff you see out there, I find some of it really interesting, and a lot of it drove the way we started this platform, but a lot of it I find super disingenuous, right? If you're taking some AI deal and showing it to the retail crowd, it either means one of two things. You got rejected by every venture capitalist in the country, and so the only way you could raise money is by bringing it to a retail investor, or you think you could get a much better valuation because you're dealing with a retail investor rather than going to a professional. Right? That's not the type of asset classes we want to bring to retail investors. We want to bring ones that are relevant to them, that they could understand, that have driven good returns, and that you're giving them access to something that before was impossible for them to access. So that's the thing we overlay on all of our asset classes. Do they fit that sort of, that thesis, right? Where it's something that, checks all those boxes.
Gotcha. And so let's talk a little bit about the experience of investing. So I like how you kind of drew this dichotomy between venture investing and some retail investing. Venture investing, they oftentimes take a board seat. They really influence, the venture. How do you see your investors influencing the investment?
Absolutely. So maybe it makes sense just from a high level to talk how an investment works on Rally Road. And so I think that'll clarify a lot of things of what it is we actually do. I like to think about it like equity capital markets, right? So there's all these participants in equity capital markets. There's the issuer of the securities, there's the investment bank like Goldman Sachs or whoever underwrites the securities, there's the stock exchange where those securities are listed, there's broker dealers, whether it's TD Ameritrade or Robinhood or whatever, who give access to the securities to the retail investing public. And then there's like that communication feedback, like the computer shares of the world, that connect investor and investment. We've taken all of that and we productized that platform, right? We turned it in, we made it pretty, we made it understandable, we made it regulated, we made it compliant, and then we made it really easy to use for a retail investor and for any kind of asset class. And so the way it sort of works is each deal follows its way through that sort of pathway, right? So we create a mini public company. Well, first we find an asset that we think is investment grade. So we've got a network of brokers, dealers, auction houses, collectors who are bringing us opportunities all the time. We run them through a very high set of underwriting standards and select a very small percentage of them that we believe are good enough to bring to our investing pool, right? We then take it, and each asset is its own little mini public company. So we securitize it, right? Each one issues between 2,000 and 5,000 shares. They're all common shares. So there's no preferred shareholders, and then we actually invest alongside every one of our deals. We buy between 2 and 10% of each deal with our own money to make sure that if it shows up on our platform, that we at least believe it belongs in something that we put our own hard-earned capital into, right? The next thing that happens is we educate everybody on the opportunity, and so that happens through the app. It's very much a storytelling app where all the provenance, all the history, all the diligence that we did to say this is an investment-grade asset is made fully public to the entire population on Rally Road. They could see every piece of information. The fourth thing that happens, we run an IPO. So we basically raise the money from all of our investors. There's no minimums, there's no commissions, there's no management fees. We basically let them buy as little as one share, which could be $10, up to 10% of the car. And we build a book of investors just like you would take, a company on a roadshow. We take that car on a roadshow. They buy up the shares. Once we fully funded or subscribe the IPO, we then use that money to actually acquire the asset. We take possession, we take title, we put it in one of our secure warehouses. And then thereafter, it turns very much into like the stock market. So we don't have continuous trading like on the stock market. What we actually do is because it's thinly traded, sort of, illiquid assets when it comes down to it, we wanted to get everybody in the room at the same time. So we let people trade once a month in what we call a trading window. And that's basically like an open market. You could see it, it's bid-ask, limit orders that basically create a book of what is the car worth and how bad do people want to buy shares. And the only shares you could buy are the ones that exist. So basically it's market supply and demand that gives you that liquidity.
Cool.
Final thing is the cars will sell at some point.
Yeah.
Right? They're always for sale. So they could be on the platform for a month. They could be on the platform for 10 years. And that's something that we anticipate let people buy them when they want to buy them.
Interesting. And so I want to touch a little bit more on the mechanics of that.
Sure.
So using, maybe not this portion, how about the Lamborghini Countach that you guys have in
Awesome.
your new
Showroom.
New York showroom?
Yep.
So how does it work? So Rally Road owns that Countach, and then like,
So-
do people that invest in it get to drive it once in a while? Do you get to touch it? Do you get to lick it? Like, what happens?